I still remember the sting on my skin, not from a slap, but from the cruel winter air scraping across my face, while my own children brushed past me like I was an obstacle ruining their perfect Christmas picture. I stood on the porch clutching a tray of warm cookies I'd been baking since sunrise, trying to ignore how my hands trembled. Through the frost-dusted window, I watched the photographer adjust his lights around my family, as if the space where I should have stood had never existed. Lauren leaned toward him, whispering something with a soft smile, and he nodded. Then he guided her to the center position, my spot. The one I held for years when their father was alive. The place where the matriarch stands with pride and belonging. But tonight, that place had been reassigned. Or perhaps taken away. "When did Mom get so clingy?" my son murmured, followed by a ripple of laughter. Their laughter. Not mine. And as if they wanted to seal the humiliation, my daughter-in-law met my eyes through the glass, curled her lips into a small satisfied smile, and reached for the curtain. She didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. She simply pulled it shut, blocking me out completely. Not one of them opened the door. Not one of them noticed the snow piling on my coat. Not one of them cared that I was standing alone, shaking, breathless, erased. If only they understood that this night would be the beginning of something they could never take back. They thought they were excluding me from a single photo, but what they were really doing was revealing the truth of how they saw me. And that truth would cost them far more than they ever imagined. Stay with me till the end, because what happened next will shock you. And if you love emotional revenge stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. My name is Beatrice, and this is the story of how my own children forgot me long before I ever decided to forget them in my will. As I stood there breathing into my numb hands, something inside me shifted, not a bitter snap, not an angry break, but a calm, steady understanding. A decision forming quietly beneath the humiliation. They believed they could crop me out of their lives without consequence, that a mother's love would stretch endlessly no matter how carelessly they tugged at it. But I am not made of elastic. I am made of bones, memories, and a heart that has limits. They had no idea what was coming. And trust me, they never saw it coming. Everything was about to fall apart, not for me, but for them. Before everything began to unravel, my days moved with a soft, predictable rhythm, the kind that feels almost sacred when you look back at it later. Every morning, I woke to the gentle hum of classical music echoing through my kitchen, the same playlist Arthur used to put on when we were young. The scent of rising dough filled the house as my old oven worked harder than I did, and sunlight slipped through the curtains Arthur installed with his own hands. I used to run my fingers along the edges of the fabric, remembering how proud he'd been after hanging them straight without my help. Sometimes, I'd talk to his photo resting on the counter. Just little things. Updates. Thoughts. Moments I wished he were still here to hear. I never lived extravagantly. I saved every coupon, reused every jar, stretched leftovers into new meals. Arthur's years of loyal work left me with enough to feel secure, and over time, that security grew quietly into something comfortable enough for the kids to tease me. Moms probably got millions hidden under the mattress, they'd laugh. They meant it as a joke, but there was always a glint in their eyes, something curious, something hungry. Still, my heart found joy in simple routines. I loved knitting blankets for the grandchildren, each stitch a tiny piece of me woven into their world. I cooked meals the way Arthur used to say only I could, slow, patient, full of heart. And I dropped those meals off at my children's homes whenever I could. Lauren loved my roasted chicken, always saying it tasted like home. Mark practically inhaled my apple pie, crumbs on his shirt before he even said hello. And sweet Emily, she used to hug me like she never wanted to let go. There were dinners filled with laughter and memories, moments where I felt like the anchor of something whole and beautiful. But little things began to tug at me. The way Lauren sighed when I asked her to carry a heavy box. The way Mark avoided helping me fix the loose gate. The way Emily, my gentle Emily, started answering my calls with rushed voices and distracted tones. Small things. Easy to dismiss. Maybe they're just busy, I told myself. Maybe I'm simply feeling more sensitive with age. Maybe nothing's wrong at all. Life still felt warm. Manageable. Mine. But beneath that comfort, the smallest cracks were beginning to form, subtle, delicate, almost invisible. The kind you only notice once it's too late. And those cracks would soon reveal just how fragile my place in their lives had become. The first signs weren't explosions, no screaming, no dramatic betrayals. They were tiny things, so small that if you blinked, you'd miss them. But tiny things accumulate. Tiny things have a way of whispering the truth before it shouts. It started one Sunday afternoon. I had spent the entire morning preparing a pot roast, Lauren's favorite, seasoned just the way she used to beg me for when she was little. I texted her, "Lunch is ready whenever you're free, sweetheart." An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, she replied. "Oh, sorry Mom. We already ate. DoorDash. DoorDash." Over my home-cooked meal. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself she must have forgotten. But when she came to pick up the blanket I knitted for her daughter, she barely stepped inside. She didn't even notice the still warm pot roast sitting on the stove. Then came Mark. He had borrowed my ladder just for a day back in October. By Christmas, I still hadn't seen it. When I asked if he could return it, he sighed the way people sigh when they're inconvenienced at a grocery store, not when their own mother asks for something. "Mom, can you relax? I'll bring it when I bring it." Relax. Over my own belongings. I told myself he was stressed from work. That's what mothers do, we excuse the very things that hurt us. But the moment that truly turned my stomach was with Emily, the one who used to cling to my arm at family gatherings, the one who cried hardest at Arthur's funeral. I invited her for tea, something she and I used to share once a week. She always said it was our little ritual. But this time, she texted, "I'll try, if I'm not too tired from going out with the group." The group. The same group she used to complain about because they were fake and selfish. Funny how people change their standards when it benefits them. Still, I set the table, teacups, scones, lemon curd. I waited. She never came. I wrapped the scones and put them in the freezer. It wasn't the freezing of the scones that broke me, it was the freezing of the tradition. And these weren't isolated moments. They stitched together like threads of a story I didn't want to read. Shorter visits. Rushed phone calls. Forgetting my birthday until late afternoon, then blaming traffic for the delay of a 2-sentence text. Internal monologue. Maybe they're just overwhelmed. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe love changes, and I didn't notice. But deep down, I felt it. The shift. The distance. The slow, steady shrinking of my place in their world. Everything was becoming quieter. And silence, true silence, has a way of warning you louder than any scream. And soon, that silence would turn into something I could no longer ignore. It wasn't just the small omissions anymore. The moments of exclusion started to reveal something darker, a pattern. A hidden hunger masked by polite smiles and feigned concern. Mark began taking a keen interest in my finances. It started innocently enough. "Mom, I think it's time we organize your accounts," he said one afternoon. "You know, make sure everything is safe. Scammers are everywhere these days." I nodded, grateful he cared. But as he detailed which investments to move, which bills he could manage, I felt a subtle weight pressing down on me. Protect me or control me. The thought slipped into the corners of my mind, unwelcome and stubborn. Then Lauren started visiting more frequently, but with an agenda. She would casually walk through my living room, inspecting my furniture, my decor, as if the house belonged to her, not me. "You know, Mom, your place is really big for one person," she remarked one morning, her voice light, casual. "We could renovate it someday, make it more practical. Maybe even divide the rooms for the kids when they get older." Her eyes lingered on the spaces, her smile too bright, too calculating. Emily, the sweet one, once so tender, had changed too. She began asking questions about the future in ways that sounded helpful at first. "Mom, have you thought about taxes on your estate? I read some strategies that can help you save money, maybe start distributing assets early, so it's simpler later." Her tone was gentle, almost worried, but the words had an undertone that set my chest tight. Beneath the soft concern was a hunger I didn't want to admit. And then came the search history I stumbled upon accidentally on Lauren's laptop. How to handle aging parents' properties. Subheadings included: what legal rights do adult children have to a parent's home? What is the fastest way to inherit parental assets? I froze, staring at the screen, stomach twisting. The polite smiles, the sweet words, the feigned concern, all of it was strategic. Internal monologue. Am I imagining it? No, this is real. They see me as a resource, not a mother. They're calculating, waiting, watching. And yet, despite everything, I said nothing. I smiled. I nodded. I played the loving mother they expected, keeping my suspicion buried deep beneath layers of calm. But a seed had been planted. One that would grow quietly, steadily, until the time came for it to bloom. Because the truth had revealed itself, their love had boundaries, and those boundaries were drawn around what they could take, not what they could give. And in that realization, I began to understand that the betrayal I had been sensing all along was only going to get worse. The days grew longer, and the silence from my children became heavier. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the absence of care that pressed down on me, a weight that settled into my chest and refused to leave. Calls went unanswered. Messages were read but never replied to. Invitations came less often, and when they did, they were rushed and superficial, as if my presence was a formality rather than a desire. I tried to tell myself it was just the pace of modern life, that everyone was busy, that I was being overly sensitive. Yet, the ache in my heart told me otherwise. I was being sidelined, minimized, rendered invisible in the family I had devoted my entire life to. One evening, I sat in my kitchen, the leftover tea cooling in my favorite china cup. I watched the door, waiting for a knock that never came. I imagined them walking in, laughing, apologizing for their absence. But no one came. Instead, I was left with my own thoughts and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The worst moment came when I visited Mark without warning. I expected a greeting, a hug, a simple acknowledgement of our connection. Instead, he opened the door with a practiced frown, barely hiding his irritation. "Mom, next time, call first." "We're busy," he said without looking at me. I stepped inside anyway, but the warmth of family that once filled these rooms had disappeared. Plates were on the table, food untouched, the laughter that once greeted me replaced by polite murmurs. Their children barely glanced in my direction. I retreated to the corner, feeling smaller than ever, as if the walls themselves had begun to close in. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to remind them who I was. But all I could do was sit and let the ache grow. Internal monologue. When did I become the outsider? When did I stop being needed, wanted, loved? I gave them everything, and yet it seems the more I gave, the less they valued me. That night, I went home and allowed myself to cry. Silent tears slipped down my cheeks, the kind that come unbidden, unobserved, and without judgment. I mourned not just their indifference, but the quiet death of my place in their lives. And in that quiet sorrow, a seed of understanding began to take root. I realized this pain was no longer just about being ignored, it was about recognizing the truth. My children's love had limits, and I had reached them. And with that understanding, the storm that had been gathering silently within me began to take shape. Because something had to change. And soon, it would. The subtle neglect and quiet exclusion had evolved into something far harsher. It was no longer a series of small slights or accidental oversights, it had become intentional, deliberate, and cruel. Every interaction carried an edge, every gesture a hidden jab, every word carefully chosen to wound. It began with the family's Christmas photo invitation. A simple message that read, "Photos at Lauren's house this Sunday. Dress nice." I spent hours preparing, curling my hair, wearing my best winter coat, baking cookies for everyone. I wanted, just for once, to feel included, to be the mother, the grandmother, the center of family warmth I had once known. But the moment I arrived, the chill hit me instantly, not the winter air, but the energy inside the house. The photographer barely looked at me. My children's smiles were tight, forced, hollow. They clustered together, bodies leaning into one another, carefully arranged. I stepped forward, hoping for even a small gesture, a hand reaching out. But every step I took, someone subtly shifted to block me from the frame. Lauren's voice cut through the hum of the house, sharp and dismissive. "Mom, why don't you just stay inside? We'll call you if we need you in the photo." I tried to respond, tried to explain, tried to offer the cookies I had made with my own hands. But no one turned, no one waited. The door closed, the curtain fell, and I was left outside again. It wasn't just the photo. It was the way they laughed without me, the way my presence was treated as a nuisance rather than a blessing. The subtle barbs grew louder, remarks about my age, my habits, my house. "You're getting a bit too old-fashioned, Mom," Lauren said while flipping through my photo albums, eyes lingering on spaces she imagined changing. Mark's impatience became palpable. "Mom, stop worrying so much," he snapped once, as if my concern for the holidays was a personal offense. Even Emily, the sweet one who used to cling to me for comfort, now offered only distracted nods, eyes flicking to her phone. The culmination came during the photo session itself. I saw it all, Lauren stepping into my spot, Mark leaning protectively around his new family, Emily laughing without a thought of me. And then the final act of humiliation, the curtains drawn, the photographer confirming, "We've got everyone important." I stood there, snow falling silently around me, heart pounding, chest tight with betrayal and rage. The realization hit me fully: they didn't just overlook me. They had made a choice. They had decided I no longer mattered. Internal monologue. This is it. This is the point of no return. They think they can erase me, humiliate me, ignore me, and I will stand by quietly. No. Something inside me has shifted. They have shown me exactly who they are. And as I walked home that night, each crunch of snow beneath my feet echoing in the silence, I knew the breaking point was coming. Because everything had gone too far. And I would not stay silent any longer. It was that night, the night I first felt completely invisible, the night the cracks in my family's love became gaping chasms. I had spent the afternoon preparing for what I hoped would be a small moment of connection, a moment that might remind them who I was. I baked the cookies, brewed the tea, and even combed my hair carefully, letting the curls fall softly over my shoulders. For once, I wanted to be seen. But as I stepped onto the porch, the air was cold, heavy, and unforgiving. The snow had begun to fall in thick sheets, clinging to my coat, dusting my hair. And there they were, inside, the people I had raised, the people I had nurtured, laughing and moving together as if I didn't exist. Lauren's voice floated out through the window, a soft, deliberate joke. "Mom, you're standing out there again. You know, it's freezing." I swallowed hard. I thought maybe we could take one photo together, I called, trying to keep my voice steady, my hands from shaking. Mark opened the door just a crack, just enough to let the cold wind cut through. "What is it, Mom?" he asked, his voice casual but tinged with impatience. I just wanted to join the photo," I said, hoping for even a flicker of acknowledgement. He glanced at the others and sighed, the kind of sigh that carries the weight of inconvenience, not concern. "We're done." "Too late now." Lauren's voice, sharp and deliberate, reached me through the glass. "We're eating. Go inside." I stepped closer, hand on the door, heart racing. "Please, just one picture." And then, the door closed. On my face. Internal monologue. This is it. They don't want me. They don't see me. They never will again if I stay quiet. How could this be my life? How could this be the family I built, the family I loved, treating me like a stranger? I sank down onto the steps, the tray of cookies trembling in my lap. The laughter inside became a relentless tide, a reminder that I had been discarded, minimized, made irrelevant. I tried to tell myself it was only a single moment, only one photo, but deep inside, I knew it was more than that. It was the culmination of months of neglect, small betrayals, and quiet manipulation. They weren't just excluding me, they were teaching me that my presence, my care, my love, no longer mattered. I breathed in, the cold air stinging my lungs, and let the anger settle quietly beneath the pain. It was calm, methodical, and terrifyingly clear. Something inside me shifted. Not a wild, uncontrolled rage, but a precise, deliberate decision. Internal monologue. They've shown me exactly who they are. They've shown me where I stand. And now, it's my turn. It's my time. I stood slowly, brushing the snow off my coat, my hands no longer trembling. This moment, this cold, humiliating, heart-wrenching moment, was the moment I knew I had to do something. Something they would never forget. Something that would change everything. Because they had left me out of their lives, and I would make sure they felt the weight of that choice. After that night on the porch, I couldn't stop thinking. I replayed every slight, every whispered joke, every look that made me feel invisible. And slowly, methodically, an idea began to form. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront them with anger. That would only make me small, reactive, predictable. No. I would let them feel the consequences of their choices in a way they never saw coming. I started quietly. I reviewed my finances, my will, the accounts and properties Arthur and I had built together. Everything I had spent years tending, every investment, every legacy, was carefully documented, precisely arranged. And I began to make adjustments. Not reckless decisions, but strategic ones. I moved things, redirected assets, created clauses, and left instructions for distribution that would shock them later. Meanwhile, I observed. I watched how they flaunted my absence, how their entitlement grew bolder each day. And I smiled quietly to myself. Their arrogance would be the instrument of its own undoing. When Lauren bragged about the renovation plans she had for my home, I politely nodded, silently noting her priorities. When Mark demanded to help me organize my accounts, I let him, documenting each suggestion, noting the way he positioned himself as the only responsible adult. And Emily, who once clung to me, now treated me as a nuisance. Her neglect became my guide for who would benefit and who would not. I didn't need to confront them directly. I didn't need to explain. I simply adjusted the pieces behind the scenes, ensuring that the future they had assumed was theirs would unfold differently. And it did. Months passed, and little things began to tip. A hesitant lawyer's call. A subtle reminder in official correspondence. The realization crept in slowly, painfully. Their smiles faltered when they realized that the house they assumed they would inherit might go elsewhere. Their casual jokes about Mom's millions lost their edge when they discovered that wealth was not an automatic right, it was a carefully chosen gift, and I was the one who chose. Internal monologue. You wanted to erase me. You wanted to humiliate me. You thought it would be easy, that I would stay silent. But silence is powerful when wielded correctly. And now, the quiet justice is yours. The most satisfying part wasn't anger or revenge itself, it was watching them squirm in the knowledge that the security, the comfort, the entitlement they took for granted was no longer guaranteed. I hadn't stooped. I hadn't lashed out. I had simply ensured that their choices, every act of cruelty, every act of disregard, had consequences. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm, a balance restored, a quiet victory finally earned. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or dramatic, it's deliberate, measured, and inevitable. And I had mastered it. The weeks after the adjustments I made in my will and finances passed quietly, almost innocuously. At first, my children didn't notice anything unusual. They carried on with their lives, confident that the wealth, the house, and the legacy they assumed would always be theirs was secured. But slowly, the first signs of unease began to ripple through their carefully constructed world. Lawyers' letters arrived. Questions were asked. The realization that the inheritance was no longer theirs, or only partially theirs, hit differently for each of them. Lauren's confident voice faltered during a phone call, the playful arrogance replaced by stunned disbelief. Mark, who always positioned himself as the responsible one, finally understood that control had been an illusion. And Emily's calls came less distracted, more tentative, as if she suddenly remembered the value of the mother she had taken for granted. The house, once a source of their imagined entitlement, remained firmly within the boundaries I had determined, safe, untouched, and under my direction. The money, the investments, every asset carefully protected, no longer guaranteed to flow to those who had assumed it would. They had treated me as expendable, invisible, replaceable, but the truth had been far different. I had been watching. I had been planning. I had been patient. Internal monologue. You thought you could erase me, treat me as a ghost in my own family. But every choice has a cost. And now, the balance has shifted. And in that shift, I finally felt the calm I had been craving for months. A sense of quiet satisfaction settled over me, not born from malice, but from justice, fairness, and the knowledge that my love, my care, and my life's work were not to be taken lightly. The weight of disappointment, of exclusion, of humiliation, was lifted. I could walk through my home, tend my garden, and feel secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed not just my dignity, but my authority, my respect, and my peace. Because they had paid the price for their choices, and I had finally reclaimed what they tried to steal, my place in my own life, unshaken, unchallenged, and undeniable. And for the first time in months, I slept without fear, without hurt, and without doubt. Looking back now, I realize that the betrayal I experienced wasn't sudden. It had been building quietly, layer by layer, until it became impossible to ignore. What hurt most wasn't just the exclusion from a single photo or the small daily slights, it was the realization that love, even from family, is not guaranteed. It must be nurtured, respected, and earned. I hope my story reminds you of something vital. Never underestimate your own worth, and never allow anyone, no matter how close, to diminish it. Boundaries aren't acts of selfishness, they are acts of survival. And sometimes, the most loving action you can take for yourself is to step back, reassess, and protect what matters most: your dignity, your peace, your legacy. Revenge, in my case, wasn't born of cruelty. It was born of clarity. It was the natural consequence of a lifetime of love taken for granted. And through it, I found something far more important than anger. I found empowerment, a calm certainty that I could not be erased, overlooked, or undervalued again. Internal monologue. Never forget your own value. Never allow neglect or betrayal to convince you that you are less than. You are the keeper of your own life, your own happiness, and your own legacy. And as I close this chapter, I do so with a soft smile, a quiet heart, and a lesson learned that I will carry with me always. Love yourself fiercely, protect your worth, and never allow anyone to write your story for you. Because in the end, your life and your peace belongs to you alone.